In this tutorial, we're going to run through the techniques used in my new sock pattern written for flexible double-pointed needles. And really the techniques used in this sock pattern, you can use any kind of needles. You can use DPNs or 9-inch circulars or magic loops or whatever, but magic loops, just one magic loop. But this pattern is written especially for flexible double-pointed needles, also known as FlexiFlips by Addi, but now there are other brands. Just last week, I released a video on options for different flexible double-pointed needles, and I have two, that makes my third video on flexible double-pointed needles, but the other two are titled FlexiFlips because up until very recently, Addi and their FlexiFlips are called Crazy Trios outside of North America. Were the only needles, were the only ones available, but now other needle manufacturers have gotten into the game. Anyway, you can use flexible double points on any sock pattern. My hope is that with the hand holding that I'm going to do, and in the pattern I'm very careful about where you are, what stitches are on what needles, what happens next when you're working the toe and the heel especially, to get you comfortable with using these needles so that you can use these needles with any sock pattern that you encounter. That's what I'm hoping, and I hope you enjoy the pattern as well, because I did pick a toe and a heel that works especially well with these needles. Now, I don't want to talk a lot about these needles because I did just release the video last week where we kind of take a deep dive into them and the different brands, but I will say that as a knitter, I really like them. I really like working with them. And as a knitting teacher, I really, really like them because they do solve a lot of the problems that people encounter or complaints that people have about working with double-pointed needles, working with magic loop, working with 9-inch circulars. You just don't have a lot of those issues. And you watch that video, I talk about it more. Just click the little eye in the upper right-hand corner to see that video. I'll also put a link to it in the video description field. So this pattern is written entirely for flexible double points, holding your hand, showing you the techniques and how to do it. These are my socks here, finished socks. This pattern is written for both men and women, and it is advanced beginner intermediate pattern. I'll say this, if you are comfortable with the basics and you've never knit socks before, this might not be the greatest pattern. I will actually give you a link to a pattern that I think is maybe a little bit better for your first pair of socks. But if you've knit socks before, that's fine. If you've knit socks, you have some sock experience, this is probably a fine pattern to use. The last thing that I'll say about these needles is that we have, different brands coming into it. It's likely the price is going to drop on these a little bit because they're pretty expensive. A set like these is close to $30. But if you're using them for socks, and really that's what they're the best for, they're best for knitting, small diameter circles. But using them for socks, you're not really going to need to buy the 12 size set of them. There isn't even a 12 size set of them. But you'll maybe just need 1 or 2 sizes for the socks that you're knitting. So they do end up being, not so expensive when you think about the fact that there are actually 6 needles here, right? And if you're using a nice brand, they're well made and, probably worth the price. Anyway, that's enough of talking about these needles. If you want to get your pattern to follow along, you can click the little eye in the upper right-hand corner to go to my website. I'll also put a link to my socks on flexible DPNs, a link in the video description field below. And I'm going to walk you through all the techniques used. And next up, we're going to get started with the cast on. We are ready to get started with the cast on for these socks. First, I want to give you a close-up and tell you about an experiment I did while I was knitting these. Let's take a look. Here is a shot of my finished socks, and the experiment that I did with these is to solve the question over 2 needle sizes that are commonly used for socks, 2.5 and 2.75 millimeters. Talking about a 1/4 of a millimeter difference. I wanted to see what is the difference. And so I knit this pair, because there's 1 clippy on here. This was 2.75 and this was 2.5. The bottom one's 2.5. And I'm going to flip these over and line them up to show you. The stripes ended up being different, that's for sure. But we are talking about maybe 3 stitches the whole width, not even that, 2 stitches the whole width of the socks different. The 2.75 are slightly bigger. So when you are trying to figure out what size needle to use, both of these socks fit me. They are a legitimate pair, no problem. They both fit me. But if you want a slightly wider sock, use 2.75. If you want a slightly narrower sock, use 2.5. Or you can use one size on each sock like I did here. I don't recommend it. This is another pair that I'm knitting. This colorway is from Turtlepurl, and it's a Christmas colorway, and I cannot think of the name of it right now. It might actually not be for sale right now since Christmas is over, but I know this one is from Turtlepurl, and it's called Tickled Pink. This is the socks that I'm knitting right now. So first up, we need our flexible double pointed needles and our yarn. I'm going to be using bigger yarn and thicker yarn and bigger needles to demonstrate this so that you can see what I'm doing. We're going to start with a Judy's Magic Cast On, which is perfect for these needles. We're going to start at the tippy tip of the toe, Judy's Magic Cast On. First thing you want to do is make a slip knot and get one of your needles in there. And then take a second needle and line it up with the first. And you don't have to leave yourself much of a tail. You do want to leave, I'm going to leave about 10 inches here. It's going to be way more than I need, but that's fine. So you want to set yourself up like this, and you want to have your left hand fingers in the yarn like you're doing a slingshot cast on. And I'll demonstrate that slower for you. The two strands are hanging there. Take your pincher fingers and put them between, and open your fingers, and then grab those two yarn strands with your other fingers to create some tension. Okay, Judy's Magic Cast On. Actually, you know what? I've released a slow motion version of Judy's Magic Cast On. If you are just doing this for the first time, I'll give you a link here. Just click the little eye in the upper right-hand corner, or look in the video description field to see my slow motion Judy's Cast On. But here, I'm going to show it slowly, but the other video is dedicated to this. So the slip knot is on what I'm going to call the back needle, and we need to put a stitch on the front needle. To do that, we're going to reach the front needle up to grab the yarn coming from my index finger. And now we need to put a stitch on the back needle. We're going to reach that needle down to grab the yarn from my thumb. Then back to the front needle, reach to grab that yarn from my index finger, reach. I don't think I've ever thought reach while I was doing this, but it's actually easier to do faster than slower. I'll slow it down again though. I'm actually doing it tight. I'm going to use the yarn on my thumb to put a stitch on the top needle or the back needle, the yarn on my finger to put it on the front needle. Okay, and you'll follow your pattern for the size you're knitting to get that number on, the correct number of stitches. That's what I'm going to do for now to demonstrate this. I'm going to turn the work, and we we already have a right and a wrong side to our work. You see here, this is smooth, and you see here, we have what looks like purl bumps. This is the wrong side, this is the right side. I have my working yarn and my tail over here on the right side of the work, or the not left side of the work, because right, I just used right to mean not wrong. Okay, I'm just going to twist these two yarns together a little bit, secures it just a tiny bit, and then pull the bottom needle to the cord. We aren't going to be using our needles like this for very long, but just this very tippy tip of the toe, I want those stitches on the cord. And now we're going to knit across the stitches here. And this is the very, very fiddliest part of the whole sock, the first few rows. All toe-up socks, I think, are like this. But it does get easier. It's kind of slow going because you saw how tight I did this cast on. I think I do it a little bit looser when I'm not trying to do it so slowly. You get to the end, turn the work. Again, slide these bottom or front stitches to the cord. And we're just going to knit across these stitches on this needle. Knit that stitch, and then from here on, the rest of the stitches on this needle are all twisted. So we're going to knit them through the back loop. Instead of putting our needle in like this, we're going to put it in to the back loop. Just for this cast on row. Everything's different for the very tippy tip of the toe. And then this last stitch is the slip knot. Okay, the very fiddliest of the fiddly things is behind us now. Still a little fiddly, not quite as bad. We want to keep these stitches on the cord, and you can see now even better. Like, this is definitely the right-hand side of the work. This is definitely the wrong side, right? Correct? Right means too many things. Now that I think about it. Okay, we want to start increasing. And in this first stitch and the last stitch on the needle, and the first stitch on the next one, the last stitch on the next one, we're going to KFB, or knit front back. So I put my needle in, wrap it, and then don't take this stitch off the left needle. Put your needle into the back loop of that stitch and give the working yarn a tug, because we're switching from one needle to the next. Wrap it and pull it through. And that's a KFB. We're going to do it again here at the end of this needle. The last stitch, work a normal knit stitch, but leave that stitch on the left needle. Get your tip of your right needle to the back loop of that stitch, wrap it and pull it through. Now we flip our needles around, and we do the same thing on the other side. Again, keep those stitches on that cord just for now. It's making our stitches, our first and last stitches, pretty tight, but we just want to make it, I just did a KFB there, yes. I just want to make sure that we have really good tension with no loose stitches in the tippy tip of the toe when we have so few stitches. Again, KFB here. And now the next round, we're just going to knit. And the way that we know that we're at the beginning of the round is that our tail end is here next to the beginning of our round. The space between these two needles is the beginning of our round, and our tail end is right there. So I'm just going to knit across these stitches. That first stitch, really give it a tug to eliminate any extra yarn between the two needles. Turn the work, and same thing on this other side. Extra good tug on that yarn on the first stitch. We aren't even using FlexiFlips the way that they're intended to be used yet, because we have so few stitches, but we'll get there. Okay, turn the work. We're going to alternate the KFB rows with a plain knitting row. So this is a KFB row. You can go ahead and leave your stitches on the needle this time. We don't have to have it on the cord anymore. See, it's already getting less fiddly. And KFB, and turn the work. And KFB. And KFB. Okay, now we're getting to a place where it's actually starting to take shape like the toe of a sock, right? You can see that? Just barely, but it's there. And so there are a few things we can do. Before we get much more knit, you can go ahead and weave in this end so that you don't have to do it later. And it's kind of out of the way. You don't have fewer things flopping around. And then take a marker or a safety pin and put it here at the beginning of your round, so that you know that the spot between these two needles is the beginning of your round. And you're going to keep alternating increase rows with plain knitting rounds, just following your pattern for your size, how many of these rounds that you're going to knit, and your stitch count and everything else. And when you finish the toe, I'll use this as an example. I take a tapestry needle and a little piece of thin yarn and put it in after the last round of the toe. Just put it in one of the stitches in the last round of the toe to mark it, so that I know exactly when the toe was finished, so I can count these rounds to make a sock to match, right? Now in my socks here, I did the toe in a different color, so I didn't have to mark the rounds. It's obvious. As soon as the pink starts, that's where I started the foot. I stopped knitting with the gray, the last round of the toe. And then I just was able to count the stitches to make the socks match. It's actually really easy to make socks match when you have this self-striping yarn that lines up so perfectly. But if you're just using one color, you definitely want to mark that. And before we finish up with this section, I want to demonstrate to you like using these needles and going around and around and what it's like, because we don't have enough stitches on here for me really to show you on this sample. So I'm going to show you on my actual working sock, my sock in progress, and how knitting with these works. So I have my, this is the beginning of my round here. My working yarn is coming from the back needle. I'm going to squish my stitches on the front needle up close to the tip. Working yarn here. I have my back needle with a strong bend in it like this. You see how that, with regular DPNs that aren't flexible, you have to have 3 needles to make this shape. But with flexible needles, you just need 2. And so just start knitting across. And you see this last stitch over here where the working yarn was coming from, unlike magic loop, it's on the needle and not on the cord. So it keeps you from getting ladders in your work. These needles help you to not have ladders in your work the way that you can get them with magic loop. This is how you're going to knit the foot of the sock as well as the cuff of the sock, just going around and around. Okay. Then you turn your work, just like we did with the toe. Squish the needle, the stitches to the front, to the tip of the needle, ready to work it. The working yarn's coming from the other needle. You put your needle in, wrap it, and give it a tug so there's no drag between the two, and then just keep knitting. And you'll get, you might have your hands different, you might hold the needles a little bit different, but you'll get into a swing of it and how it works for you. Okay, so we went through the techniques in the toe, and that's how you're going to use these needles for knitting around and around and around. And next up, we're going to talk about the gusset, which is really easy. We'll cover that next. Once you finish the toe and the foot, the pattern will tell you exactly where to stop knitting just the regular plain knitting foot part of it. To start the gusset increases. The pattern will tell you exactly for your shoe size, the length of your foot, where to start doing that. And actually, this is a pretty easy part of the video. Let me go ahead and show you. Pretty easy part of your sock knitting. So toe, foot, you see this line right here? We increase stitches. A lot of people say that this is what makes a really well-fitting hand knit sock, is to have a gusset like this. So we're going to increase to accommodate the widest part of the foot, which is the heel here, and that's what we're going to do in our socks. Again, I'm using thicker yarn and bigger needles to demonstrate, so you can see what I'm doing. Here is my beginning of my round, is here between these two needles. That's the marker for where I finish the toe. I can also add another marker here to show exactly where I'm starting the gusset increases, so I can make the second sock to match. That's actually what I did here. Okay. First thing I'm going to do is I'm going to start with a make one right. So I have this bar between the two stitches. I'm going to pick that up and put my left needle in back to front, and then put my needle into the front loop of that stitch to knit it. And if you need a slow review of make one stitches, I'll give you a link here and also in the video description field below. We want to use make one right and make one left in the gusset increases, because you saw how nice that line of stitches looks. Yeah, that's what we're after here. And here we're going to do a make one left. I'm going to pick up the bar between those two stitches and put my left needle in from front to back, and then knit that through the back loop. And then just knit across the stitches on the sole. All of the action for the gusset increases is on the first needle. I don't normally knit over a table like this with the needle tapping on the table. Okay, that was the first round of gusset increases. The second round of gusset increases is just a plain knitting round, which you don't have to watch me do, but I'm going to show you, we need to add a marker to our work. We need to add two markers so that we separate what is the instep of the sock from the gusset increases, so you always know where your gusset increases are. And I didn't have you place a marker on the first round just because we had enough going on with making one in between the two needles. So this time we're just going to knit. This is like round 3 of the socks. You knit one, and we're going to make one right again, which is hard because I just did a make one right on the last round. It won't be this hard when you have, actually I can't even do it. You're going to make one right, and once you work a plain knit round between the two, it's a breeze. And then you're going to place a marker and knit across the instep stitches, and you have an exact stitch count in your pattern. And then you're going to place a marker, make one left, and then knit one. And what you end up with, as you keep working the increases, this is the beginning of my round, you end up with a lot of gusset increases, your marker, your instep stitches, your marker, and more gusset increases, and the sole of the sock just continues to be just plain knitting. And that's how we end up with that awesome line of gusset increases on both sides that make such a nice fitting sock. As you would expect, your pattern tells you exactly what to do on each row, and you'll finish the gusset increases, and next up we will start the fleegle heel. Once you finish the gusset increase rounds, we are ready to work the fleegle heel. And I will mention again, the pattern tells you exactly where you need to be, and if you're switching colors for the toe and the heel, the pattern also specifies exactly when to switch colors from your main sock color to your toe heel color and back to your main sock color. So do pay attention to that in the pattern. But we're going to get started on the fleegle heel, which is it really is ideal for these these needles. I'm really happy with how it works out. So let's take a look. Here we are with our gusset increases finished. And again, I'm working with much thicker yarn and bigger needles so you can see what I'm doing. And this is, I'm only working with a few stitches. This is the beginning of my round. I've knit across the gusset increases, knit across the instep stitches, and knit across those. And I finished that ahead of time so you wouldn't have to watch me do it. And I'm here at the sole stitches, the bottom of the foot. And this marker is there as a favor to myself because I can't count and talk at the same time. You're going to follow your pattern up to the middle of the heel stitches. And you'll be counting to get there. I don't have to because I have a marker that I placed there for myself. And then you want to place a marker. I'm going to use this little ring marker. And then follow the rest of the pattern for shaping this heel. I'm going to knit two together, knit one, and turn the work. Now this is where it gets really different from anything else we've done to this point. We have the wrong side of the work facing us. We are working on purl stitches, and we aren't going to be working all the way around on all the stitches in the sock anymore. We're just going to be working on just this heel section. So we're going to turn the work each time. You want to slip one, purl 5, a little awkward. You'll get the hang of it. It's not very many stitches. Purl 2 together. Whoops. Purl 1, turn work. Now we're back with the knit side of the work facing us, right? Slip 1, knit 6. Knit 2 together, and you'll see there's a big gap between those 2 stitches. That's how you know you're on track. If you're knitting 2 together at that big gap, you're on track. Knit 1, turn work, back on the purl side, slip 1, purl 7, there's the big gap, purl 2 together, purl 1, turn work. And with these decreases on each row, we're eating up all of these stitches, right? And let me show you what this little heel looks like. We are still down here, but we're eating up these stitches and making this shape at the back of the heel that looks so cool and shaping the whole thing. And eventually you're going to keep working back and forth until you don't have any stitches left on this needle or on these 2 needles. We need to start eating up stitches from this needle, from the gusset increases that we did. And that's the next thing I want to show you because this is what I recommend doing. It's pretty handy with these needles. I have shaped the back of my heel, and this marker at the center back of the heel is the new beginning of my round. And I need to keep working the, slip 1, knit however many, knit 2 together, knit 1, turn work, but I don't have any more stitches left. I need to use these. This is what I'm going to do. I'm going to take my 3rd needle and transfer those stitches before the marker onto my 3rd needle. And you can go ahead and take that marker out because we're finished with it. And then transfer those stitches onto the heel we've been working on, the heel. Yes, the heel we've been working on, the needle we've been working on with the heel stitches. Because we're going to eat all of these stitches up with these decreases that we're doing. And we'll do the same thing on the other side. Transfer all of these stitches to the third empty needle up to the marker. Remove the marker. And then transfer them. I like to transfer them to the right. Well, actually, no, we're going to leave those there because we're going to come back to, no, we're not. We're going to transfer them. Actually, I think it's easier to transfer them from the other side at the end of the row. It doesn't matter, we'll get there. I might have to transfer them back. I will have to transfer them back because my working yarn's here. No problem. Sometimes you think you've got it 100% right, but it's easy enough to fix, right? It's knitting. That's an awesome thing about knitting. Okay, now I'm ready to work the next row, where I'm going to slip one and knit across, and then I'll be eating up these stitches over here. You can just leave them on the third needle. And so we have the instep stitches. We're not going to work. We're going to keep following our pattern to work across the heel stitches. Keep decreasing at the end of each row until we get the fleagle heel shape. And then once we get, we'll pull my working sock back in here. Once you get the heel finished, and here's my finished heel, you're going to just keep working around and around and around again. Again, the pattern is very clear about where to change back to your main color if you changed color for the heel. Around and around and around again, and because these are toe-up socks, you can pretty much keep going until you're just about out of yarn, and then work some ribbing, which is all laid out in the pattern, and a stretchy bind off, and you're done. Now I'm just looking to see if that seemed really easy. It was really easy. We knit the whole pair of socks. Anyway, this pattern, like I said, is written for these needles. My hope is that it will get you comfortable with the needles so you can continue to use them in all kinds of patterns. But maybe I'll have more patterns in the future that are written specifically for these needles. We'll see how you guys like this one and go from there. I hope you enjoy the knitting. Good luck.